Joining me now, the great congressman from the state of Texas, Chip Roy, who's been leading so many charges in Washington, D.C. I wish we had 100 of them. Chip, all right, first of all, what do we need to know about spending, Ukraine, Afghanistan? What do we need to know? People aren't up to date on this stuff like you are.
Well, we could be here for a while, but let's try to boil it down to its most simple form. We've got a bill that is moving through the Senate that is a, quote, continuing resolution to keep government funded beyond the expiration that will occur this Friday. In that continuing resolution, you have an extension of existing funding levels, but you have a whole lot of other stuff in 237 pages, including, as you alluded to, $12 billion for Ukraine, again, without any significant accountability of which I'm aware, as well as a whole bunch of other expenditures and programs. But what you don't have, zero for, is any kind of changes on our border, any kind of changes with respect to vaccine mandates, any kind of changes with respect to energy policy, any of the other things that this administration is doing to screw Americans every single day. You have zero changes on this policy. So what Republicans should be doing is fighting for those things, or at a bare minimum, at least push this off in a continuing resolution until the new year, until January or February, rather than punting this to December to give Democrats yet another bite at the apple. But just last night, 27 Republicans voted with Democrats to move this all along so we can do it for the troops, Jesse. We can do it for defense. We can do it for Ukraine. We continue to just screw every American under the sun in the name of something not American. And that's what they're doing.
All right, before we're going to circle back to that point here in a moment. What happens if we don't do it? People don't know what these words mean, continuing resolution. All right, what if Republicans for the first time grew a spine and didn't do it? What happens, Chip? Does Washington, D.C. just descend into ash immediately on Friday at midnight?
Yeah, hardly. Well over 80% of government continues to operate. The vast majority of the things we spend our money on as a government are, quote, mandatory spending. I'm talking about everything from food stamps to Medicare to Social Security, but also a whole bunch of other programs. And the vast majority of it would continue to operate. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Congress voted, I think it was a mistake, but they voted to basically say that it doesn't matter what happens, you'll be guaranteed your paycheck, government employee. So for the most part, everything just keeps operating like normal. Yeah, there's some cash flow problems. Yes, it's not an ideal way to run government. But the idea that the members of the House of Representatives, Republicans in particular, will give up the power of the purse that the founders gave to us, that James Madison wrote about in Federalist 58, to say, hey, we're going to give you, the people's house, the house closest to the people, the power to check an executive branch that maybe, I don't know, call me crazy, is running out of control. And that's what we should be doing to hold up the ability of these guys. By the way, Republicans shouldn't be funding the things they campaign against, and don't let them get away with it.
Okay, so where's Republican leadership in the House, senior Republican leadership? I'm genuinely asking the question. When Nancy Pelosi wants the votes, Nancy Pelosi whips and gets the votes. How do we lose 27 Republicans? How can that happen?
Well, let's differentiate a little bit between the House and the Senate. I will say credit to Kevin McCarthy. He said a few days back that he didn't think we should be voting to continue to fund this government if we weren't going to get changes at our southern border. Yesterday, Steve Scalise announced that they will be whipping against this legislation in the House. I hope all Republicans will oppose it. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell is not doing that. Mitch McConnell is continuing to run the Senate business as usual, ignoring as if this administration isn't actively at war with its own people in the form of firing our men and women in uniform for not taking vaccine mandates, in the form of wide open borders in which Americans are dying, 72,000 last year from fentanyl poisonings, more than all of Vietnam in total, as if we're not screwing over the American people with higher cost energy and a weaker grid, as if we're not continuing to fund things like the IRS agents to go after the American people. He's just ignoring all of that, just saying, well, we'll just have to deal with that when we hopefully get in the majority. How about you use the power you have right now? 41 senators could stop this, and they're refusing to do it.
Okay, why? Can you explain that to me? Because that's so radically out of step with the Republican base right now. It's honestly, it's spitting in their face, Chip. Why make that move if you're Republican leadership in the Senate?
Because they've been cowering in the corner since 1995, afraid of the word shutdown. Instead of going on offense and saying, hey, we've got the power to go offer a funding bill to fund government properly, the way the American people want us to, that balances, that actually funds the border being secure, that funds all of the priorities of the American people. Instead of going on offense and saying, if Joe Biden doesn't want to sign that bill, if Democrats don't want to agree to us on that, they're the ones that will shut down the government. Instead, Republicans go, we can't have a shutdown fight 40 days before an election. Chip, don't you understand? The pollsters have all told us the right words to use. And if you just say that we will come together on a bipartisan basis to secure the border, it'll magically happen. You don't have to actually use the powers the founders gave you to do it. That's what they do. And here we sit, $30.5 trillion in debt, wide open borders, engaged in Ukraine, with devastation to our energy policies, harming the American people. The good news is, I think there's movement in the House. Now we need to just go browbeat the Senate to actually man up and fight.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, The Forgotten Genocide, the first episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.